Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Israel targets Hamas leaders in Qatar after the group takes responsibility for the Jerusalem shooting. The White House denies links to the Jeffrey Epstein drawing as the sex trafficker's birthday book files are made public. And Nepal's Prime Minister resigns as deadly protests and unrest grip the capital. Now, Israel has carried out a targeted attack on senior members of Hamas in Doha during ceasefire negotiations. Israeli media say collective heads Khalil al-Hayya and Zahir Jabrian are among those hit. Earlier today, Hamas took responsibility for Monday's shooting of 6 people in Jerusalem. Israeli officials told local media the US were informed of the strike. Now, in a statement, Israel said, for years, these members of the Hamas leadership have led the terrorist organization's operations, are directly responsible for the brutal October the 7th massacre and have been orchestrating and managing the war against the State of Israel. Prior to the strike, measures were taken in order to mitigate harm to civilians, including the use of precise munitions and additional intelligence. The IDF and the ISA will continue to operate with determination in order to defeat the Hamas terrorist organization responsible for the October the 7th massacre. We can now go live to Herzliya to speak to Middle East correspondent and author Jotam Confino. Jotam, just before we start our conversation, I do want to bring some breaking news. A Hamas official has told Al Jazeera TV that the group leadership survived Israel's attack on Doha. So we are hearing from Hamas that the group leadership have survived that attack on Doha. But last week, Jotam, you predicted Israel would target senior Hamas members in Qatar and also in Turkey. So what's your reaction to today's blast, and who do we believe has actually been killed? As we know, the statement is saying no one at the moment.
Look, it's interesting that Hamas is already saying that the leadership survived. I would say that we should caution that statement just a little bit, because Hamas often waits a long time with actually confirming whenever their leaders are killed. One example is Mohammed Sinwar, who was killed in Gaza, the leader of Hamas, and it took a long time for Hamas to even acknowledge that he was killed. So I would say we should probably be a little bit cautious, even though Hamas is obviously quick to basically humiliate Israel, because if indeed they have survived, that's really bad news for Israel. But as for who they were targeting, we know that they were trying to go after Khalil al-Hayya, who's Hamas's top man, the top negotiator abroad in Qatar. He's closely aligned with Iran also, ideologically at least. They also tried to target Zahir Jabrian, who is Hamas's financial brain, so to say. He oversees their financial network. He's also overseeing actions in the West Bank. They apparently also targeted Mohammed Darwish, who heads the Shura Council, which elects Hamas leadership. So some of the top figures, and by the way, also Khaled Mashal, who is a longtime leader of Hamas, also residing in Qatar. But if it turns out that Israel did not kill any of those, that, I would say, is a huge failure, because they took a risk by attacking Qatar, an ally of the United States, and a crucial negotiator in the ceasefire negotiation between Israel and Hamas.
Yes, indeed, Jotam. And I think that question is going to be asked now, if what Hamas are saying to Al Jazeera TV is correct, that all of the group leadership did survive. But let's talk a little bit more about Hamas itself. What does it mean for Hamas as an organization now following this attack? How weakened have they become?
They've become very weak because Israel changed the rules of the game. They do no longer allow Qatar to give immunity to Hamas leadership. So even if they didn't kill them this time around, they will probably try again. And if Israel eventually ends up killing all of Hamas's leaders in Qatar, that is a huge blow to the organization. The leadership generally has suffered immense blows. Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader, has been killed. The actual big leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, was killed, his brother. The list is very, very long. And when you keep attacking and eliminating the leadership, that affects what's happening on the ground. But up until now, it hasn't really forced or strong-armed Hamas into making huge concessions. And that is what Israel is hoping by attacking the leadership. They hope that after having, hopefully for them, killed the leadership, Hamas will shake in, it will shake their ground, and that they will surrender and they will take the deal that's on the table by the United States. So this is Israel's strategy. In terms of what's happening on the ground, Hamas is preparing for a full-on invasion by the Israeli army in Gaza City. So they are dealing with something completely different, while the leadership abroad is dealing with the ceasefire negotiations.
But it is interesting when I hear you speak, because Hamas did say that it was going to agree to a ceasefire plan in place. And Jotam, over the weekend, even on Sunday, it appeared to me and many people watching the news and following the story closely that actually a ceasefire was really, really close. So Qatar and a lot of other analysts are saying right now that these negotiations were happening, they were close to brokering a ceasefire, and this is why Israel also struck the building in Doha, because they don't want peace. Israel wants war. They want this to continue. Benjamin Netanyahu wants to stay in power.
There is definitely a point to be made that the Israeli government is looking to continue the war because Netanyahu wants to stay in power, and he's got certain ministers in his cabinet who are very militant and who don't want to deal. That's definitely true. But there's also a second truth to this, because Netanyahu likes to play on many different horses. And the understanding among many analysts in Israel is that he actually would like for there to be a comprehensive deal to get all of the hostages out, because occupying Gaza is a massive burden on Israel financially, on the military, and he's not interested in becoming the de facto ruler of more than 2 million people in Gaza. And in terms of what Hamas has said to this Trump ceasefire proposal, I've also heard conflicting reports. I did hear that Hamas half agreed to it. They said, well, we're open to it, but we don't want to release all of the 48 hostages on day one, which was one of the main points by Donald Trump. So I think it's very hard to really, really know what's going on behind closed doors. All I can say is that Israel, by going after Hamas's leadership, is trying to strong-arming them into more concessions and to agree to the deal that Israel wants.
And Jotam, Israel has attacked Yemen and Iran. We can't forget that. However, Qatar appears to be a different kettle of fish. It's where negotiations were taking place. What does this mean for ceasefire talks? And what message does this actually send that Israel has attacked a sovereign country?
Look, for Israel, Qatar is a sovereign country, obviously, and it's one of the countries that they've been dealing with the most since October the 7th. But Israel has a very, very difficult relationship with Qatar, because Qatar is housing Hamas leadership and financing the very organization that committed the atrocities of October the 7th, while they're trying to play neutral negotiator here. So Israel doesn't see this in terms of international law. They see Qatar as having broken so many rules in the game that the gloves are off now. But you're right, it is a different kind of country because it's a close ally of the United States. And currently, as far as I'm concerned, they've pulled from the ceasefire negotiations, which is also, one of their ways of showing that they're not happy with this and they're trying to punish Israel. So this could all derail completely and escalate diplomatically, leaving Israel without a crucial negotiator that can leverage Hamas. But it is a different country in terms of military might. When Israel attacked Iran, they knew that there were going to be ballistic missiles fired at Israel. In terms of Qatar, I don't think we should expect Qatar to start firing missiles at Israel. I could be wrong, but I don't think that that's going to happen.
Jotam Confino, thank you so much for your analysis and for speaking to us. Always a pleasure to have your thoughts. Now, let's continue this conversation with former Israeli MP and policy analyst, Dr. Einat Wilf. Dr. Wilf, what a pleasure to have you on the show. I was just speaking to our correspondent a little bit earlier, Jotam Confino, but why has Israel chosen to do this now, at this point, where the ceasefire appeared to be really very close? I did ask Jotam the same question, but does Israel just not want peace? Do they just want war? Is this what Benjamin Netanyahu is looking for?
Quite the contrary. Let's start with, personally, I think it's something that Israel should have done on October 7th or 8th. The immunity that Israel granted to the leaders of Hamas in Qatar, the fact that Israel legitimized Qatar as some kind of mediator and broker, even though Qatar was busy 24/7, clearly supporting the planning of the massacre. But since the massacre of October 7th, Qatar has been busy 24/7 in ensuring that Hamas can use the hostages in order to secure its position and ensure that despite having committed the massacre and the invasion, it will pay no enduring price, that it will be able to end this process by continuing to rule Gaza, either directly or through some fake technocratic government that it will control behind the scenes, and that the billions will continue to flow in, again, under the title of reconstruction, but in order to basically prepare the next massacre. Now, we reached essentially the end point where both Israel and Hamas were kind of buying time. Hamas and Qatar were using the hostages to essentially stay in power. Israel just wanted our people back. But now we got to the point that there's no more time buying. Hamas made it clear that it hasn't budged an inch in its response to President Trump. It said that basically the last hostage will be released when basically Israel is completely out of Gaza without even any kind of defense perimeter.
Sorry, I just want to make a point, because you seem to be linking Hamas and Qatar together directly. But I would like to say that Qatar have actually been mediators. They've tried to broker a ceasefire deal. They have held talks, and Qatar would disagree strongly with the rhetoric that they were directly involved in the October the 7th attacks. And I also just want to bring some other news to you. Hamas officials have told Al Jazeera TV that the group leadership survived Israel's attack on Doha. This is a massive failure for Israel, if this is correct, because Israel have failed in the operation that they tried to carry out today. That's not a good look on the international stage.
So first, to your first comment, yes, Qatar has been very good at pretending to be a mediator, but all they've been doing 24/7 since the day of the massacre is very busy ensuring that Hamas survives the massacre, controlling Gaza and getting the billions, and pay no enduring price. Because the proper response to what Hamas did on October 7th should have been complete surrender. And when you speak of a ceasefire, that is, this is really unacceptable. And the fact that Qatar has been busy ensuring that Hamas does not pay an enduring price for invading Israel and massacring Israelis is precisely the nefarious role that it has played since October 7th. And personally, I think Israel should have done this attack on October 8th at most. If it has failed, I agree with you. This is really bad. But I only hope that this means that the notion of Hamas immunity in Qatar is gone. And if we fail this time, we should definitely try again, because the message should be very clear. Neither Qatar nor Hamas can emerge after what they did on October 7th as legitimate players. Hamas absolutely has to surrender, accept defeat, and only then something positive can be built.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens next now. So we know Israel have struck Doha. Does Israel risk precautions now after taking such measures against Hamas today and bombing Qatar, which is a sovereign country. It seems like Israel's had a really big step change now, and they almost just pushed the button and they said, right, we're going full force here. But do you think Israel itself and the people of Israel are now safe?
Oh, we've been under attack for decades. Apropos sovereignty, I'm sure you'll be semi-amused to know that when Israel essentially extracted Eichmann, one of the top Nazis from Argentina, Argentina protested that its sovereignty was actually kind of violated. The fact that Qatar gave immunity to the planners, the perpetrators, the leaders of the invasion and massacre of October 7th is something that could not stand. Also, in terms of attacks, Qatar has been waging the propaganda war, which I argue is even more important than the actual physical war, essentially creating a propaganda arm that is not really a news organization, Al Jazeera, that inserts anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism into the bloodstream of the West. Also using Al Jazeera as part of the way it wages war against Israel, in many ways limiting Israel's ability to win this war. This is what Qatar has been busy doing through propaganda, through the strategic use and the nefarious use of the hostages to ensure that basically Hamas doesn't have to surrender and that Israel cannot defeat Hamas. So as far as I'm concerned, Qatar is a warring party, not some lovely negotiator, and this attack has been way overdue.
But just before I let you go, sorry, we are slightly running out of time, but Qatar and the US actually have close relations. We know that there's a big military base in Qatar, an American one. I mean, does what Israel's done risk the destabilizing of relations between America and Qatar?
Oh, I sincerely hope so. I think it's the U.S. should have announced a long time ago, when it became clear the role that Qatar was playing, that it will move the base to the UAE. And thereby actually put a base in a country that is really allied with America and not Qatar, which plays host to some of the most terrible actors in the region, is busy buying right and left every university, every think tank, inserting the worst ideas into the America's most hallowed institutions, from the UN to its universities. So yes, if this helps destabilize relations between between the US and Qatar, that would be wonderful.
Dr. Einat Wilf, former Israeli MP and policy analyst, thank you for speaking to us. I'm now joined by Erol Morkoc, a spokesman for Republicans overseas and defence intelligence expert. Erol, it's a pleasure to have you on. So I don't know if you just heard my guest ahead of you, and I asked her what this strike by Israel means for relations between the US and Qatar. Is that a major concern now after this escalation?
I would say that it's not even a concern. It's actually quite to the contrary of what the prior guest expressed. And while I understand her sentiments or personal wishes, in this situation, we're seeing it unfold on the television screens. This was something that was well arranged with Qatar. This was something that was well arranged beforehand with Israel and with the United States. Now, these are countries that all have a shared goal. And Hamas was something that the United States had placed in Qatar with the permission, of course, of the Qataris, because we needed a place to keep what was going to be sort of the cornerstone of how our foreign policy with Gaza and Israel was going forward. But as Hamas overplayed their hand on October 7th, and as Israel's reaction escalated to the point where Iran's nuclear facilities and other things were targeted, a lot of things were done to make it that this cohort in Qatar was no longer strategically relevant as an intelligent asset for the United States. for Qatar or for Israel or for anybody. And now they were slated to be eliminated. So these people had almost built themselves their own gilded cage, thinking they were protected. But every single one of those people who danced and celebrated the destruction on that sort of famous video was killed today. And they were killed today by the consortium of Israel, Qatar, and the United States.
Erol, I just want to say, actually, we did get some news through across the news wires, and we are hearing that the Hamas leadership did survive the latest Israeli strikes on Doha. Sky News is reporting that they understand this, as well as Al Jazeera TV. So we are getting reports that the Hamas leadership did survive. Is this an epic fail for Israel?
If Hamas's leadership has indeed survived, absolutely, because then they've completely overextended themselves. Qatar has been more of a gracious host than anybody realizes. I mean, keep in mind, this is the only country to be bombed by Iran and Israel in the same year, it seems like. So that on one hand has been a strategic failure, if this news is correct. If they have failed to hit their target, and if they have strategically not lived up to the very high expectations they have, now they've damaged these relations, and they've kind of proven the disingenuous nature of this Hamas contingent that was really an intelligent asset that was set up there. So if they've survived this attack, then this is a catastrophic failure for, at least the implied lethality of the Israeli special forces, as well as the fact that we weren't able to apparently kill them in their own place while we have control of the skies and the local government. That would be an incredible failure if that is indeed true to come out.
And has this in any way inconvenienced President Trump's attempts to broker a ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel? Because, Erol, in the recent days, it appeared a ceasefire deal was actually pretty close.
I think that it comes down to President Trump's words that he gave us, which was about 24 hours ago or a little bit more, if I'm not mistaken. He said, these hostages need to be freed. You have one day, and if you do not do that, the next step will be coming, and basically you will not like that step. This was the next step. So in the end, when you're holding people hostages and trying to sort of dog walk them to peace deals, it's not going to work out when Donald Trump is on the other side of that. He's a hardball negotiator, and I think once they weren't willing to ameliorate any of his concerns, he was willing to, go all in. However, if they have failed at this, and now they don't have, because think about it, what you're going to do is you're going to knock out the entire leadership and then replace that leadership. Hamas is a fractured organization that's controlled by a lot of other proxies. So the idea that you could reform a Hamas and then make a deal with them is probably a much better deal than working with these existing people. If you failed to kill them and you didn't do that, now it's really not going to be a very good chance for peace whatsoever. And those hostages' lives that are in Gaza are in much better or much worse danger today than they would have been otherwise, if this indeed did go poorly, as you have informed me.
Yes, indeed, Erol, and I think that's the concern for many people, the lives that are being lost. We've heard from the hostage families today, and there is serious concern, the repercussions for those loved ones that are being held in Gaza. But another question is, does this dilute Trump's influence over Netanyahu, or is Donald Trump's voice the only one that can change Netanyahu's mind now on a full occupation inside Gaza City, to bring an end to this war, to come to the table and have a ceasefire?
I think you're absolutely correct in saying that Donald Trump is the only person left who can talk to Bibi Netanyahu. He's the only person who understands perhaps how to deal with somebody like him, and as well, he's the only person who's willing to use the power of the U.S. purse strings and the power of the office in a way that has opposed him before. And while everybody sometimes thinks that Donald Trump is playing to Netanyahu's fiddle, very much Bibi Netanyahu aligns his interests with the general U.S. strategic alliance, and then very conveniently is included in that situation. So going forward, I think the only person who can stop this catastrophe from getting worse is Donald Trump. He's the only person who has that humanitarian spirit inside of him there. I don't think anybody else in the region is committed to lives and just in the concept of lives. Obviously, Bibi Netanyahu has his own goals and own tangible goals that aren't aligning, I don't think, with the U.S. strategic interest. And as much as Israel is an independent country, they are in many ways a vassal state of the U.S. hegemonic empire. Without the U.S. Navy, there is no Israel. In 6 months, the country functionally would not be there. It cannot defend itself without the United States, which gives the United States a tremendous amount of leverage in these negotiations.
Erol Morkoc, a spokesman for Republicans overseas. Brilliant to have you on the show and your analysis and insights. Thank you. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. More than 20 civilians have died in a Russian airstrike on a village in Donetsk region, with another 21 injured. The attack has hit the village of Yarova as people waited for pensions. President Zelensky has called on Kyiv's allies to ramp up pressure on Moscow. Thailand's Supreme Court has ruled the former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra must serve a year in jail, calling his hospital stay after a corruption conviction unlawful. The 76-year-old spent hours in a cell before claiming heart issues and being moved to a luxury hospital ward. The decision marks another major setback for Thailand's most powerful political dynasty. Norway's Labour Party is celebrating another win as Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store secures a second term against a surging populist right candidate. Voter turnout hit its highest in years, but Labour is now facing a slim majority and will need to bring smaller centre-left parties on board. The result also marks significant gains for a Progress Party, which doubled its seats in Parliament. Police in New Zealand have released the first images of campsites where fugitive father Tom Phillips lived with his 3 children since 2021. 2 of the children were found at one of the sites after Phillips was killed in a shootout with police. Authorities say the kids are safe, but it will take time for them to recover from the ordeal. And a British endurance swimmer has just completed a 4-month swim around Iceland, battling freezing seas, pounding waves, and even losing parts of his tongue to salt water. Ross Edgley powered through 36 kilometres a day to finish the epic journey. Known as the British Thor, he got a nod of approval from Thor himself, actor Chris Hemsworth. Files from a Jeffrey Epstein birthday book have been released, showing a number of tributes to the late sex trafficker. The documents include a hand-drawn picture of a woman's body signed Donald. Addressing the image on X, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt said President Trump did not draw this picture, nor did he sign it. Let's go live to Washington now to speak to our correspondent there, Sarah Firth. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. OK, so lawmakers have just released the so-called birthday book compiled for Jeffrey Epstein back in 2003. Gosh, 238 pages. It includes messages from politicians, celebrities, and even alleged notes from 2 US presidents. What exactly do these documents reveal, and why now are they emerging?
Yes, Leigh-Ann, this huge cache of documents that have been released. Now, this was after the Republican-led House Oversight Committee subpoenaed to have them released. And amongst those documents, you've got this letter allegedly written by President Trump. Now, for those who haven't seen it yet, committee Democrats have posted this online, and it shows lines of text that mimic a conversation allegedly between President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. In one part, it says, "We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Enigmas never age. Have you noticed that?" And the end of the note, it says, "A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." And those lines of text outlined by a sort of crude drawing of a woman's body. At the bottom, you have a typed signature, Donald J. Trump, and underneath that, what appears to be Donald signed in thick marker pen. Now, this is part of a 50th birthday book that was compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell. It includes hundreds of messages from very well-known individuals. Some of them, Leigh-Ann, the White House this morning flatly denying that President Trump wrote this letter, signed this letter. The president himself coming out today and calling this a dead issue, but it has reignited speculation about who Jeffrey Epstein knew and what the nature of those relationships were.
Yeah, indeed, Sarah. And as you said, the White House, you know, they are denying it. But there's no denying that these Epstein files and the possible Epstein list is what people want to be released. And this is something the Republicans said they were going to do. They haven't done, and it keeps on coming up and up again, the longer and longer it's delayed. But what has the political fallout over this actually been? And how damaging could this be for Donald Trump? It's sort of like a leaking tap that hasn't really stopped.
That's a great way to describe it. And you've really seen the pressure mounting on the president. Leigh-Ann, this morning on Capitol Hill, you've had lawmakers, congressmen, people being asked about this letter repeatedly. You've got the Republicans sort of trying to dodge the issue, pointing to the White House's denial, the president himself coming out and calling it a dead issue. But this isn't an issue that is going away. We've seen the White House and the president from the beginning of the revelations of the existence of this letter. That was back in July. The Wall Street Journal published information that this letter existed. From the get-go, the denials could not have been more categorical from the White House. They've said that it's not true. The president himself has come out in the past and said it's fake. I don't draw pictures of women. But Leigh-Ann, very interestingly, you've got this push by the committee to release not just what's come from Epstein's estate in this latest round of documents, but for the entire FBI investigation into Epstein, for all those files to be released. Now, the calls for that vote, they are just two votes away, two people away from getting that to become a reality. They need to either see two Republicans potentially join on board. There's already 4 Republicans that have broken with the White House that have agreed to push for this vote. So either 2 more Republicans join them, or, Leigh-Ann, at the end of this month, there's going to be some special elections which will likely see some more Democrats elected that will give those extra votes. So it's looking more and more likely that there is going to be that vote calling for the release of all the files. So this is not a situation that is going away, despite those categorical denials from the White House. President Trump himself, of course, once the publication about the existence of that letter came out, he has filed a defamation lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and its owner, Rupert Murdoch, for some $10 billion. So his denials are categorical. Today, though, Leigh-Ann, there are some Democrats coming out and saying, look, it is clearly his signature. We've got the letter now. We've seen the letter. And very likely further down the line now, we're going to see this push for a further vote for all of the FBI investigation files into Epstein.
And Sarah, just quickly, Lord Mandelson's letter calling Epstein his best pal is also attracting so much attention. How is this actually playing out on both sides of the Atlantic?
Yes, Leigh-Ann, this has always been a scandal that has been transatlantic. You've had numerous figures that have been named. Mandelson has come out in the past and said that he deeply regrets having ever met Epstein. But the revelations of his note in that birthday book compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell, hugely embarrassing. He calls Epstein sharp-witted. He describes how he was parachuted into his life. The words are warm and glowing.
Sarah,
it is a massive embarrassment.
Sarah, I'm so sorry. We appear to have lost the connection to Sarah Firth there, who is in Washington for us. Sarah, I'm just wondering if you could hear me?
I can hear you.
I do apologise. I do think we're having some trouble on the line, Sarah. So we'll leave it there. But thank you so much for bringing us the latest on that Epstein birthday book that was released. I do appreciate it. Sarah Firth in Washington for us. Thank you. Now, Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli has stepped down amid massive street protests in the country's capital. The former leader says he hopes his resignation will help resolve the unrest. Yesterday, security forces fired at demonstrators, killing at least 19, while Kathmandu International Airport is now closed due to the violence. Patrick Falk reports.
In Nepal's capital of Kathmandu, the unrest continued, with protesters setting tyres alight to block traffic. Anger against the government showed no signs of abating following deadly clashes with police the day before. Demonstrators marched, chanting slogans in defiance of a curfew imposed on several districts. Once again, clashes erupted with the police, with people hurling stones at them. They responded by firing tear gas. Still, the protesters refused to back off. Once this government resigns, this man says, today's movement will gradually come to an end. Under increasing pressure, that's precisely what happened. With the situation spiraling, KP Sharma Oli stepped down, saying he did so to bring an end to the crisis. He took over as Nepal's leader in July last year, his fourth time in office, with the backing of the Nepali Congress Party. The protests were triggered by a social media ban imposed last week. It followed a campaign shining a light on the lavish lifestyles of politicians' children and allegations of corruption. Late on Monday, authorities rolled back the restrictions in response to the backlash. But it failed to quell the demonstrations. The Prime Minister's resignation plunges the poverty-stricken Himalayan country into fresh political uncertainty. And protesters still don't appear to be ready to let up. Here, they're seen setting ablaze the homes of other ministers. Reports say the residences of several high-profile politicians came under attack. Meanwhile, the army has posted an appeal on social media, asking people to exercise restraint. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Rupert Murdoch has reached a deal over his media empire, ending a long succession battle. Eldest son, Lachlan Murdoch, will take control of the news group, which owns Fox News, The Wall Street Journal and The New York Post. Reports suggest the three other Murdoch siblings will be given a payout of $1.1 billion. Apple is releasing a new range of iPhones today. Sales grew 13% year-on-year in July, and overall revenue grew by 10%, with the company's CEO putting the revenue boost down to the release of the iPhone 16. While sales have been strong, results show customers are only upgrading when they feel new features are actually worth the money. Turning to all the sports news now, when England's head coach Thomas Tuchel says his side will face high emotion against Serbia in Belgrade on Tuesday night. It's expected to be the toughest World Cup qualifier for the Three Lions squad. Tuchel has 7 more games to go before he names his official team for summer's World Cup. And former Spurs boss Ange Postecoglou is set to become the next Nottingham Forest manager after Nuno Espirito Santo was sacked on Monday. Nuno admitted that his leadership with the club's owner had broken down. Postecoglou's appointment comes before Forest's game with Arsenal, which is this Saturday. A reminder of our top stories now. Israel targets Hamas leaders in Qatar after the group takes responsibility for the Jerusalem shooting. The White House denies links to the Jeffrey Epstein drawing as the sex trafficker's birthday book files are made public. And Nepal's Prime Minister resigns as deadly protests and unrest grip the capital. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.